All right, it is 5 past, so without further ado, I am going to introduce you to our lecturer for today, Mr. Pablo Rice. Pablo Rice is a policy officer in charge of cyber affairs at the Paris Peace Forum. In this capacity, he contributes to coordinating the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace, one of the main multi-stakeholder initiatives to advance common norms for human security in the ICT environment. His fields of expertise include cyber and hybrid policy, law of armed conflicts, arms control law, and online content governance. And today he will deliver a lecture aimed at unpacking the cyber mercenaries phenomenon and explore the current dynamics and remaining challenges in the global response to counter the proliferation of cyber intrusion capabilities. So without further ado, Mr. Rice, the digital floor is yours. And I will be
Thank you very
sharing my
much,
slides.
Stephanie, for the nice introduction. Hello, everyone. So I would like to first thank you very much for joining me today for a lecture on a topic which has gained particular momentum across the world over the past year, which is the cyber mercenaries phenomenon. So, of course, some of you, maybe most of you actually, will wonder what is behind this somewhat shiny term of cyber mercenaries. This question, which may seem quite simple at the first glance, is perhaps ultimately the most challenging one given the opacity of the ecosystem it refers to. It is, however, crucial because it provides a foundation for any comprehensive policy action to address this issue. Next slide, Stephanie, please. Next slide.
Is it not showing? I click next. Hold on.
I can see a slide. It says table of contents.
The third one, please. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you.
No worries.
So the term cyber mercenary began to gain a certain echo in 2016 in the context of the revelation to the public at large of the use by a number of governments of a spyware for spying software called Pegasus and produced by the Israeli firm NSO. This spyware is basically capable of bypassing the security systems of most smartphones by exploiting a set of zero-day vulnerabilities that NSO discovers or acquires on an ongoing basis in order to access files, messages, photos and passwords, listening, of course, phone calls, or even triggering audio and video recording, as well as the geolocation. All of this is done remotely in a discrete way from a workstation installed by the company on the client site. So while NSO presents its products as a solution for fighting terrorism and organized crime, several civil society organizations have revealed since 2016 that it was also being used to target political opponents, human rights activists, journalists, corporate executives, and officials both inside and outside the borders of the client state. So when it comes to the most, let's say, notable targets of this spyware, in 2020, a report based on a forensic analysis, two United Nations special rapporteurs accused Saudi Arabia of having infiltrated Jeff Bezos, so Amazon CEO, phone with a spyware that might be Pegasus. Also in 2021, the consortium of investigative journalists Forbidden Story, which is a French organization, revealed on the basis of a listing recovered by Amnesty International that Pegasus may have been instrumental in the assassination of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul in 2018. The same investigative consortium had also revealed that the list of targets contains the telephone numbers of 6 current heads of states and prime ministers, including the French President Emmanuel Macron, without, however, being able to identify the instigators of this operation with 100% certainty. So the organization at the forefront of this effort to unveil the spyware scandal turns to be the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto, Canada, which is, let's say, an interdisciplinary lab on tech policy. And it was precisely its director, the Professor Ronald Deibert, who first brought this idea of mercenary spyware to the attention of the wider public. And I think that the term mercenary was perhaps chosen quite opportunistically at the time because it made sense to the general public in order to emphasize that this intrusive software and services had not been developed internally by states, nor was the result of state-sponsored threat actors, but it was referring to a commercial service provided by economic operators, some of which, as NSO, having a proper and regular legal existence as being regularly established on the territory of a state. Next slide, Stephanie, please. So that being said, the term mercenary also has a well-established existence in international political instruments and international law to designate certain actors in the physical world. This raises, of course, the question of whether this term, as traditionally understood in international norms, is also relevant in the cyber environment. So the term mercenary is, for instance, defined at the Article 47 of the first protocol additional to the 1949 Geneva Convention as any person who is specially recruited locally or abroad in order to fight in an armed conflict, taking actually a direct part to the hostilities. In this context, he has to be motivated essentially by the desire for private gain that is in fact promised by or on behalf of a party to the conflict, and the material compensation should substantially exceed the one promised or paid to the combatants of similar ranks and functions in the armed forces of that party. Finally, a mercenary is neither a national, a resident of a party, nor is a member of a party's armed forces, and has not been sent by a third-party state on official duties. So we can see that such a definition is quite difficult to apply in cyberspace, as the threshold of armed conflict in this environment is rarely met, or in any case is highly controversial, even in the case of offensive operation. The term mercenary is also defined in the first article of the 1989 International Convention against the recruitment, the use, the financing, and the training of mercenaries, but this time in two ways, distinguishing between a context of armed conflict from the other situations, including in peacetime. So the definition of mercenary during armed conflict does not change from the protocol additional to the Geneva Convention, but in other contexts, the convention defines the mercenary as any person who is specially recruited locally or abroad for the purpose of participating in a concerted act of violence aimed at overthrowing a government, of otherwise undermining the constitutional order of a state, or also undermining the territorial integrity of a state. And all of this is also associated with the same conditions of compensation and independence of the mercenary as for the context of armed conflict, as described in the additional protocol to the Geneva Convention. So the second definition is already, let's say, more relevant to cyberspace, in particular because the concept of undermining the territorial integrity of a state can be understood quite broadly. However, the idea of a concerted act of violence may be challenging to qualify with regard to the use of ICTs. Finally, the term mercenary, in the physical world at least, can also be linked in certain respects to the concept of private military and security companies, which is a concept that appeared much later in the international debate to cover the new realities of warfare, where the categories are, let's say, more blurred, and also to stick more to the trend towards the privatization and outsourcing of defense activities across the world. In this regard, one major intergovernmental policy instrument has been released in 2008 called the Montreux document. Montreux is a city in Switzerland, on international legal obligation and good practices for states related to private military and security companies' operations. It was a result of an international process launched jointly by Switzerland and the International Committee of the Red Cross. This is a non-legally but politically binding instrument, which is now endorsed by 17 states. It defines the private military and security companies as private businesses entities that provide military and/or security services, irrespective of how they describe themselves. So this rather broad definition might be more appropriate to the phenomenon I'm talking about today, and could, for instance, cover the activities provided by certain notable spyware firms such as NSO. However, there are, I would say, two difficulties with this definition. On the one hand, it may be too broad to designate barely anything. And on the other hand, it refers to businesses, entities, which may exclude, in fact, all these entities, groups, or individuals operating from the underground market. So finding a sufficiently precise and at the same time exhaustive definition is therefore an ongoing challenge, especially for a cyber environment where boundaries are more and more blurred, intentions are difficult to qualify, and conflict is increasingly hybrid, as well as the use of proxy is becoming a key feature. Next slide, Stephanie, please. So in 2021, a United Nations working group on the use of cyber mercenaries of mercenaries, not cyber mercenaries, established by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, released a thematic report on the human rights impacts of mercenaries, mercenary-related actors, and private military and security companies engaging in cyber activities. So first of all, this report takes note of the ongoing challenge to apply the traditional notion of mercenary to the emerging field of conflict, defense and security. It designates cyber mercenaries as these actors who benefit from developing, maintaining and operating cyber capabilities and cyber services, which might be used in the conduct of hostilities, but also in non-conflict settings. Those cyber services include both the provision of support services to states in relation to existing cyber capabilities that they own, and also the provision of cyber products that they can be utilized by states. Finally, the report says that the multiple types of cyber activities and methods of cyber operations that are currently being undertaken by cyber mercenaries include the sabotage via malware or ransomware, espionage, and also the subversion, which involves the supply of misinformation and disinformation services. So this definition is already more precise thanks to the example it mentioned, but it's also likely to be understood maybe too broadly so as to cover all the players providing cyber tools and services, including the strictly defensive purposes, and that are aimed actually to enhance the global level of security of the client's infrastructures, such as in the context of penetration testing or honeypots of targets. Next slide, Stephanie, please. So now we are moving, considering that the remaining definitional challenge can perhaps not be overcome at first, or at least during a presentation of 1 hour, it might be actually bypassed by focusing not on a well-defined actor, but maybe more on the ecosystem as a whole that underpins the commercial proliferation of cyber offensive capabilities and services that have a damaging effect on the rights and interests of a range of actors, first of states, of course, but also of populations. Next slide, Stephanie, please. The slide before, please. Yeah, thank you. So this cyber intrusion ecosystem can be structured around 3 main pillars of supply. Such an understanding is irrespective of whether the different points of the supply chain are operating from the underground or from the semi-regulated market. I have drawn these categories both from comprehensive studies released by the Atlantic Council in 2021, and also, which I, by the way, invite you all to read, and also from the working definitions of a new intergovernmental initiative called the Palmal process, which we will discuss later. Again, they are not perfect and fully comprehensive categories, as the international efforts in finding some is ongoing, but I hope it will allow you to have a quite, let's say, clear overview of the dynamics at stake here. And also, let's remind that these different spaces and functions can be quite intertwined or overlapping, as a same actor organization can sometimes carry out in-house several of the tasks and missions that I will describe now. So let's start from the very beginning, which is the vulnerability research and exploit development marketplace. So as you all might know, researching vulnerabilities, especially the so-called 0 days vulnerabilities, is not necessarily a bad thing per se. It can take place in academia setting or in other very lawful companies or state-led programs or frameworks, such as bug bounty programs or coordinated vulnerability disclosure processes. It therefore can enhance actually the overall level of cybersecurity and stability when it takes place within a diligently designed and implemented framework. We can say, however, that the development of vulnerabilities exploit is already a little less neutral in nature, even if it can also serve cybersecurity purposes. But that's put aside, also some players, mainly non-state actors, such as zero-day vulnerabilities brokers, have much more profit-driven intentions and therefore trade zero-day vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities exploits, including in a non-diligent and non-ethical manner, whether the transactions are taking place on the semi-regulated markets or on the underground marketplaces. So without due diligence, there is therefore a substantial risk that these vulnerabilities and exploits will eventually find their way into the hands of actors with harmful intentions, including, of course, cyber criminals, adversarial state actors, but also other commercially driven private actors who are also parts of the cyber mercenary ecosystem at stake here. The second point of the supply chain it relates to the commercially driven developer and brokers of malware. So as a reminder, just for some of you, a malware and an exploit are not the same things, as an exploit is a kind of method, an entry point, let's say, to deliver malware, such as spyware that we discussed earlier, but also ransomware, trojans, botnets, stalkerwares, and so on. And again, these malwares can be sold on semi-regulated markets in a quite regular way, as it is the case, for instance, for some spyware such as Pegasus, but also some stalkerware. But then can also be sold on underground places which obey to, let's say, more or less strict self-regulation principles. So malware can either be sold in one shot, let's say, or can be part of a somewhat broader package of services that from the suppliers that include customer support at the stage of installation, operation, and implementation, maintenance, and upgrade. So the malware as a service can even rely on a command and control infrastructure that is still owned and operated by the supplier itself. Is it, for instance, the case for Pegasus, for which the tech unit of the civil society organization Amnesty International revealed that it was depending on several in-house command and control infrastructures operated by NSO, made of hundreds of domain names, DNS servers, and other network infrastructures. So malwares used by customers can even be sold under a licensing model with a limited number of uses and targets depending of the license purchased. And once again, this principle rules NSO Pegasus spyware. And then the third point of the supply chain is the operational delivery mission, where some individual groups or organizations operating underground or within a legally established entity carried out the intrusion of or offensive operation with the malware they purchased or they developed themselves. We tend here to distinguish between two main sets of factors according to the market from which they trade their services. So the first set of factors are the hacking as a service companies that can be defined as regularly established entities that offer unauthorized computer system penetration as a services that target a third party without the consent of the third party. So the customers usually identify requirements such as the target selection and consume the resulting information stolen from the third party. The second set of actors here are the hackers for hire, which are unaffiliated individuals or group of actors that are hired by states, entities, or even individuals to conduct computer system penetration to meet the customer requirement. So again, this tentative trichotomy to describe the cyber mercenary ecosystem and supply chain is somewhat, let's say, artificial, as things are much more, most of the time at least, intertwined and overlapping than this brief summary. What also complicates our understanding of this phenomenon as an harmful trend for cyber peace and stability and for people is that these three pillars, these three categories, and most of the services and tools that are at the heart of these three categories can also be at the heart of completely ethical, even let's say noble and non-harmful activities aimed at strengthening the level of cybersecurity of customer systems and to actually prevent them from actual damaging attacks. And even if somewhat harmful to some, these capabilities and services can also serve legitimate digital forensic purposes for national or international security reasons. It's often then challenging to really distinguish between the intents, but anyway, I think it provides a good basis for thinking about the policy options available to tackle the irresponsible use and proliferation of the intrusive capabilities and services. Next slide, please, Stephanie. So yeah, before moving on, I would just like to recall that the industry as a whole is estimated to worth several billions of dollars. The figure of 12 billion a year is often put forward. It comes from actually an analysis carried out by Moody's a few years ago on what it called in the report the lawful interception technologies market, which includes numerous surveillance tools that do not necessarily have anything to do with the phenomenon I'm talking about here. And this figure also does not take the underground market into account. So the exact worth of this market, both semi-regulated and underground, is quite difficult actually to verify. Also last year, the think tank Carnegie Endowment for International Peace reported that at least 53 states had acquired targeted surveillance technologies between 2011 and 2023, including 44 regimes classified as closed autocracies or electoral autocracies, and 13 electoral democracies or liberal democracies. Next slide, please, Stephanie. So now we will move on to the policy and legal options to curb the damaging proliferation and irresponsible use of cyber intrusion capabilities. So far, a large range of measures have actually been deployed within the multi-stakeholder community to curb this phenomenon over the last decade, with, of course, varying results. I have chosen to classify the available measures into three categories according to what they are actually targeting. Next slide, Stephanie, please. So the first set of measures is those targeting the supplier itself, whether it is directly or indirectly. So among them, export control measures are the most common policy option offered to states authorities. And such an effort can take actually several forms. First, you have very targeted export restrictions that are company specific, such as imposing exports or transfer license, or even denying the granting of such license. For instance, in 2021, the US Commerce Department added 4 major spyware firms, including NSO and the Israeli Kandiru, on its entity list. So when a foreign entity is on this list, US companies are banned from exporting, re-exporting, or transferring items to that party, unless that US company gets a special license requirement from the US administration. So such entity-specific export restrictions can also come from the states where is actually based the designated entity. So for instance, from early 2022, the Israeli Defense Export Control Agency froze the granting of export licenses for cyber intrusion companies established on its territory, and there are a lot actually, there is a lot, and then allowed only export of intrusion capabilities to democratic countries only. And it has been quite challenging then for the cyber intrusion companies present in Israel. So these measures were actually effective and led to the closure of the takeover of major spyware companies. But they were also effective precisely because they came from Israel and the US, which are key players in this field. Because, as I said, Israel is a world center, let's say, for cyber intrusion capabilities, with a lot of these companies on its territories, and also on the US side, because American components and services are crucial for the same companies to operate properly. But the recent dynamics of the cyber intrusion ecosystem show us that these firms, or rather the individuals behind these firms, when faced with such difficulties specifically targeting the entity as such, set up new companies with new names, but with the same tools and services in new favorable jurisdiction. So again and again, because there are plenty of safe events, let's say, across the world. And so it's quite difficult to put a real stop to the industry growth by remaining entity specific and adopting a case-by-case approach. So states can then turn to the adoption of international export control frameworks that targets the items as such, the capabilities as such, with the aim of ensuring that supply companies do not actually escape restrictions. So the main instrument of this type, specifically covering intrusion software, is the Wassenaar Arrangement, which is a multilateral agreement to control exports of the conventional arms, but also dual-use goods and technologies, which has been established in 1996, and is now endorsed by 41 states. So since 2013, and following a French-UK proposal, the participating states added the intrusion software and IP network communication surveillance systems to the list of dual-use controlled items. And as a result, and rather than controlling intrusion software itself, the arrangement put export control on software, system, or equipment that interacted with intrusion software. So, if you want my opinion, let's just say that the numerous revelations about the cyber intrusion industry over the past decade reveal actually the ineffectiveness of such an update. And in my opinion, this is due in particular to the fact that the Wassenaar arrangement is not legally binding. First, it's only politically binding, and that there are many differences of interpretation in its implementation by participating states, and also that in the end, it also concerns only 41 states. So therefore, key players at Cyprus, Israel, and almost no countries in what we call a bit quickly, the Global South is participating to this arrangement. With the exception, we have to note that, of South Africa, which is one of the only country in Africa. A second option then is to deploy targeted sanctions against the identified firms. So it happened actually very recently. I see that happening last week, in fact, as the US Treasury Department designated 2 individuals and 5 entities associated with the European-based spyware consortium called Intellexa. So such sanctions are quite broad in scope, as they block any assets owned by them and located in the US, including properties and any entities owned in majority by them. And they also prohibit all transactions by US persons or within the US or transiting via the US that involve any property or interest in property of designated or otherwise blocked persons. Also in February, the US State Department announced that it will allow the US administration to impose global visa restrictions on individuals who would have been involved in the misuse of commercial spyware, as well as on individuals believed to facilitate or derive financial benefit from this misuse. So this has, of course, an advantage because it's particularly radical and potentially dissuasive for other suppliers. And targeting individuals can also be effective, as numerous analyses have shown that the same individuals are sometimes behind many companies that close and then open elsewhere in a more favorable, let's say, jurisdiction under another name. But there is a challenge. As for targeted sanction measures, case-by-case approach can hardly keep pace with the growth of this market and the dynamic of the proliferation of cyber intrusion capabilities. A third option then is to target this actor, is to rely on judicial and law enforcement means. So you have basically two main options here, depending which layer of the market you are targeting. The first possibility is to simply sue the firms before courts. It is offered not only to public authorities, of course, but also to non-governmental stakeholders and individuals, and is deployed with regard to established and properly legally established entities. So this can work mostly if you have a legally recognized interest in taking legal action, particularly as a targeted individual and victim, or as a provider of the software or hardware targeted by the intrusion capability. This is also essentially only possible before the courts of jurisdiction that have, let's say, an extraterritorial law that is also relevant for cyber-related situations, and then can give a kind of extraterritorial effect to the judicial decisions happening on its territory. And this is basically the case for the US. So for instance, over the past years, WhatsApp, which is owned by Meta, has sued the company NSO before US courts, as Apple has also done. So these litigations are still ongoing, but have been quite successful so far for the claimant, so Apple and Meta, with most of the NSO attempts to avoid legal proceedings were actually unsuccessful. And when it comes to individual complaints, the wife of the murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which I talked about earlier, has filed a complaint very recently against NSO before a US federal court in Virginia. But in October 2023, the same court of Virginia dismissed the case, arguing that he has no jurisdiction over the situation at stake. The second possibility related to law enforcement is to conduct law enforcement operations that target groups or individuals operating from the underground market in order to take down the marketplaces where vulnerabilities, malware, or hacking as a service are traded. So over the past years, we have, for instance, seen several law enforcement operations coordinated by Interpol's Cybercrime Directorate that led to the closure of darknet marketplaces for hacking as a services, such as on the occasion of the 2022 Africa Surge operation co-led with Afripol, or the 2023 16 shop operation, happening mostly in Asia. And Europol, so the European Organization for Police Coordination, is also undertaking such operations. It has, for instance, been quite active over the past 3 years, with, for instance, the closure in 2021 of the marketplace's dark market platform, which was used to sell malware. Then the last option to target suppliers is, which has actually proved effective, is the traditional and the old so-called traditional name and shame, which is not only actually offered to state authorities, but to the whole multi-stakeholder community, including to the civil society organization, which has been since the very beginning of the spyware scandal very instrumental in unpacking, unveiling this phenomenon. And let's say that name and shame can also be undertaken by the government, especially as they are taking kind of strong actions. It was, for instance, the case for the US government, but also in the context of the European Parliament investigation of the use of Pegasus by European member states. And those two efforts have considerably increased public and political scrutiny worldwide on these companies, as well as on other individuals and groups providing intrusion capabilities. Next slide, Stephanie, please. So then, alongside measures targeting the suppliers, you have those measures aimed at targeting the customers. So first, state executive or legislative order can impose a ban or restrictions to the use of some tools or to the recourse to certain services by the agencies, the public agencies of the same states, especially intelligence and law enforcement agencies, which are the main customer of intrusion capabilities, at least in terms of transactional value, let's say. So in this regard, the US White House has released in March 2023 an executive order that prohibits federal agencies from the use of commercial spyware that poses a threat to national security or counterintelligence, or that could be employed by foreign governments to violate human rights or to target Americans. So therefore, any agency interested in acquiring spyware technology must first conduct an individual assessment to determine whether the transaction meets the executive order requirements. So while this measure has been very welcomed overall within the multi-stakeholder community, some critics highlighted however, that there is a kind of waiver for the use in the case of extraordinary circumstances. Some stakeholders are also calling for an extended global moratorium on the use of spyware, such as, for instance, Costa Rica, which is the first state doing so in 2022, alongside several UN human rights experts, as well as many civil society organizations, such as Amnesty International or Access Now. There is, in my opinion, little chance, however, that such a moratorium will be achieved one day, at least because of a clear lack of political will, as government authorities are increasingly relying cyber intrusion capabilities. However, yeah, no, I think that's all for this one. So next slide, Stephanie, please. And then last set of measures, you have the measures targeting the endpoint, what I'm calling the endpoint, which is the targeted hardware or software. So the first option here, the first possibility, is for the industry to take itself some industry-led policies and measures to increase the security of the targeted products. So, of course, suppliers of technology products and services are always faced with the dilemma of keeping pace with technological innovation and at the same time taking sufficient time to best secure the products they sell, diligently identify and quickly patch the vulnerabilities contained in their products. So, Apple, when it comes to technical means, Apple has, for instance, tried to find a third way by offering a lockdown mode for its iPhone since 2022, which is aimed at reducing the attack surface that potentially could be exploited by highly targeting mercenary spyware, in somewhat, let's say, downgrading the user experience when activated and restricting the functionalities of the smartphones. A much more long-standing and widespread strategy, which is not, by the way, limited to facing and addressing intrusion capabilities, is for a company, to establish coordinated vulnerability disclosure and treatment policies, and also to launch bug bounty programs in order to increase the multi-stakeholder and ethical cooperation in finding and alerting about vulnerabilities, especially between the research community and the vendors. So, critics of such measures point out, however, that there are such policies and strategies such as bug bounty programs or coordinated vulnerability disclosure processes are sometimes, even often, let's say, too company specific. They are sometimes poorly designed and implemented. And that they do not always exempt researchers in vulnerabilities from all legal risk. And also that in the case of bug bounty programs, that they can have some, let's say, adverse effects, especially as they can reinforce the financial motivations for identifying vulnerabilities. The second policy option under this category is much more top-down. It's much more top-down because it relates for governments to adopt stricter rules of security by designs for suppliers of hardware and software products, both during the design and after-market phase. That includes, of course, vulnerability disclosure requirements from the suppliers of ICT products to the public authorities. This is, for instance, the case of the European Union Cyber Resilience Act, which has been adopted very recently, actually, in December 2023, and which is a significant development in increasing the security requirements for manufacturers of products transiting or located on the EU market. And this can have actually even global repercussion on the national policies and strategies across the world. So regarding vulnerabilities, this EU Cyber Resilience Act aims to harmonize the vulnerability disclosure policies among the industry players in EU by providing, for instance, and this was actually the most controversial provision during the negotiation, that device manufacturers have to report any exploited vulnerabilities in their products to the member states computer security incident response team within the 24 hours, and that was the controversial point, after identification of the vulnerability, even before this vulnerability can be patched. On the other side of the Atlantic, the US Biden administration is also following such a trend of pushing for stricter security by design requirements for US tech industry firms. As the 2021 executive order on cybersecurity, or also the national 2023 cybersecurity strategy clearly indicates, even though the US administration does not impose directly, at least for now, does not impose directly binding rules on the industry players. And of course, considering that these regional markets, so the European Union one and the US one, are still the most prominent ICT market in the world, so such regional efforts are likely to have a global impact, as I said. Next slide, Stephanie, please. So, of course, all the measures I detailed during the last minutes are very complementary to an increasing need for a strengthened international cooperation. So, by the very nature of the internet and by the modalities of the transfer of ICT tools and services, as well the way in which the cyber intrusion ecosystem is perpetuating, it is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many other stakeholders, crucial to extend efforts to curb this phenomenon beyond like-minded countries, to target especially major safe haven, let's say, for the intrusion industry, as well as targeting major state customers. All efforts in this area are therefore faced with the challenge of universalization, and that's precisely why international cooperation and diplomatic efforts are absolutely complementary to the measures I described before. So such efforts, diplomatic and international cooperative efforts are aimed at first at conducting an awareness-raising work and achieving a common understanding of the issues and of the potential risk, not only for human rights, because there are unfortunately many states which don't pay many attention to human rights, but that also pose a risk to national and international security. And such diplomatic and cooperative efforts can also lead ultimately to increase the political incentives for states that are reluctant at first to engage in such efforts, with the long-term goal ultimately to achieve some politically binding or even legally binding norms to curb the proliferation and misuses of cyber intrusion capabilities. And so, as I said earlier, this issue has gained a true momentum worldwide among governments since the end of 2022. And that has been followed by the establishment of several joint cooperative initiatives worldwide. Some of these initiatives are mainly intergovernmental. It is, for instance, the case for the political statements made by 10 countries in March 2023 and released by the United States during the second summit for democracy, which calls to step up in efforts to counter the proliferation and misuse of commercial spyware. More recently, in February 2024, France and the United Kingdom launched an initiative with, let's say, a broader scope called the Palmal process that has been joined so far by 25 states and which is aimed at tackling the proliferation and responsible and irresponsible use of commercial cyber intrusion capabilities as a whole phenomenon, let's say. the cyber intrusion issue is also beginning to have some echo within traditional multilateral processes, in particular within the United Nations Open-Ended Working Group on ICTs, as the chair of the group was mentioning during last week, actually, a session which I was attending, that cyber mercenaries were posing a threat, an urgent threat that need to be addressed by states, of course. But alongside intergovernmental efforts, and considering this issue, this effort can't be actually limited to governments only, but has to involve the larger multi-stakeholder community. Again, as we have seen earlier, civil society organizations have been quite instrumental in unveiling and unpacking this phenomenon and increasing public scrutiny on it, which calls then for further action and measures. We have also seen that these industry players, including providers of software and hardware products that are actually targeted by the capabilities at stake, have a major role in any kind of solution. Therefore, as part of the Paris Call for Trust and Security in cyberspace that I contribute to coordinating, the Paris Peace Forum has launched a multi-stakeholder work since early 2023 that involves public actors, industry players, academia, and civil society organizations to identify the best levers for curbing effectively and on the long term the negative externalities of this ecosystem, while strengthening awareness raising beyond the actors from like-minded countries and trying to have a decisive influence on multilateral processes and intergovernmental initiatives work. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, I think I've said enough. Enough talked so far. And so I would like, again, to thank you for watching. But I think we have a little time left. So if you have any questions, I will be delighted to answer.
Thank you, Pablo, for that lecture. Found it very interesting, as I'm sure the rest of everyone here has as well. I just haven't had a chance to look at the Q&A box, but we can do that now. I'm sure there are some questions here. Yes, quite a few. Let's see. Okay, here's one. Would you say cyber mercenaries create a positive or negative impact in cyber resilience within countries' data?
So it's clear, I mean, again, it's like there is two sides of two way of approaching the broader cyber mercenaries ecosystem. Of course, some states and most of the states actually don't have internally the capabilities to ensure cyber stability and resilience within their territories. But at the same time, all the reports since 2016 clearly shows that cyber mercenary firms, especially those operating on, let's say, less regulated markets or even operating underground, are clearly undermining not only the cyber resilience and security of data within the states they are established, but also by providing services and tools to other states, undermining the cybersecurity overall and the cyber resilience of states overseas, and which has in turn real consequences on international and global cyber stability and security.
Great, thank you for that answer. We have another one here. What would you see as the main risks or costs for spyware manufacturers, such as the NSO group themselves, in licensing or selling their products to other states?
So basically, which kind of policy action is likely to have the most impact of these groups, on these groups?
The main risks or costs, yeah, I guess impacts, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, the measures that have proved to be the more effective so far have been, as I said earlier, very targeted and company-specific measures. That includes specific case-by-case export restriction that kill, let's say, their opportunities of growth, and also the targeted sanctions, especially the ban the prohibition for companies or other actors from key markets or states to pass transactions with those firms. Another set of measures that have proved particularly relevant, but also because it was used by a key player as the US, was the ban of the use by the public agencies. Because basically, of course, I mean, the US is a big supplier, customer of cyber intrusion capabilities, but as it is the US, it creates a strong signal among the international community to adopt the same posture and approach. And it has produced actually the closure or even the change of ownership of a lot of companies, most of them being based in Israel.
Thanks, Pablo. We have another one, actually. We have time for a few more. I see we have 5 minutes left, so we'll just keep them coming. People who are bug bounty hunters, can they be called cyber mercenaries, and how can the relate pen tester? Oh, how can they relate to cyber mercenaries or not? I think that's what the question is trying to say. Bug bounty hunters.
That's a really good question, actually, because basically it relates to what is the actual scope of the definition of cyber mercenaries. Because of course, if you are a bug bounty researcher, and that was also relating to the side effect I was mentioning earlier, if you are a bug bounty researcher aimed at selling the vulnerabilities you are finding, even if it's to companies, that creates of course a risk. So yeah, I think it will be crucial to determine, and especially as part of the current intergovernmental and multi-stakeholder efforts, to determine whether and in which kind of situation a bug bounty researcher, a vulnerability researcher, even what as we call the white hat researcher, can be called cyber mercenaries.
Great. Thanks for the succinct answer, Pablo. We also have another one here. It's quite interesting. They're saying, found it interesting that there's an entire downstream value chain to cyber attacks and incidents using role players that may not necessarily be illegal in nature. Can you comment on their culpability in the enacting of the hack?
I'm not sure to have understand the question.
Let me see if I can rephrase it. They're saying that there's an entire downstream value chain in cyber attacks using role players that may not necessarily be illegal in nature. So some people that are basically like on the line between illegality and legality, and they're asking if you can comment on like their culpability, like if they're how much they can be at fault in being part of the hack, I would say.
Yeah, so basically, again, a hack is not necessarily supposed to have malicious means. I mean, a hack, let's say a penetration of computer system, is not necessarily meant to have malicious means, and can happen, in fact, in a context for the enhancement of the global security of a customer. And that's also why cybersecurity firms and service providers regularly established across the world can be actually very valuable for the multi-stakeholder community. So of course, it's also it's always about the intents, which is always difficult to qualify. But yeah, definitely. I mean, if you are just like focusing on spyware, and very sophisticated spyware, those capabilities are very as a kind of very targeted focus, let's say. So it's and it's not causing the risk of proliferating attacks, but it's the growth of the market itself and the increase in demand for some capabilities which themselves rely on some vulnerabilities that a lot of actors can find not only on regular market but also on underground markets, that fuel the proliferation of malicious software and in turn of cyber attacks conducted by plenty of different threat actors.
Great, thank you for the answer. I think we have time for one more, just keeping an eye on the time here. Someone says, do you think AI threatens the existence of cyber mercenaries? And are white hat hackers used as the main combatant of fighting cyber mercenaries? Two-part question.
Okay, so basically, when it comes to AI, I mean, the AI enabled cyber attacks and the increasing cybersecurity risk enabled by AI, that's currently, and most of you know that, it's currently a big debate which remains a bit theoretical so far. You know, we have not seen that much concrete applications of that. Beyond, I mean, the mere phishing templates, let's say, and scams operations. So yeah, it remains to be seen. Of course, AI will provide further opportunities for these firms to being even to be even more sophisticated and to target even more their attacks in a even more furtive and discreet way, or even to launch very large-scale attacks, of course. So yeah, it remains to be seen what kind of weight it will have in the near future. And when it comes to the second question. So now, of course, actually, I mean, like white hat hackers have been instrumental in unveiling and unpacking the spyware scandal and the cyber mercenary ecosystem. For instance, I mean, like Amnesty Tech, which is the tech unit of Amnesty International, or even the civil society organization Access Now or the Citizen Lab, are either being white hackers themselves or are working very closely with white hackers. So no, definitely they've been instrumental. And so that's also why we need to enforce and establish much more kind of reliable frameworks, legal or policy framework to protect actually this white hat hacker, to really define what is a white hat hacker as well, what could distinguish them from the proper cyber mercenaries which need to be tackled, and yeah, to create a proper legal responsibility which matches, let's say, with the added value, of course, of white hat hackers.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. I just want to take this moment to thank Pablo on behalf of everybody here. Thank you for the very interesting lecture, for taking the time to speak to us about this very interesting phenomenon. If everyone can give him a round of applause in the reactions, like so. And great, yeah,
Thank you very much again.
Yeah, and there is a Mentimeter quiz that's optional for everyone that wants to stay on from the past two lectures of today. So I will be sharing my screen and you can take this Menti quiz if you would like to stay on. It is optional, so it is up to you. But
sure.
Thank you again, Pablo, for speaking today. Great, thanks. All right, so for those of you that are still staying on and want to do this quiz, I'm going to share my screen. Are there still people here? I hope so. Yes, there are. Great. Hi, Noel. All right, so oh no, not this screen. Sorry. I am having technical difficulties. Where are we? Not this one. Not this one. It seems to want to keep showing Pablo's PowerPoint. All right, where are we? Share. And here we go. Can everybody see this? And can everybody access the code Mentimeter? Just go to menti.com and then you put in this code and then you should be able to do the quiz. My goodness. Are there people in here? I think yeah, okay, we are getting people in here. A couple. 3 so far.
Stephanie, could I just remind the students who've got questions to, instead of putting their hands up, just pop your question in the Q&A, and I'll attend to that as soon as possible.
Great. Can I ask Noelle how many people are still in the chat so I can know how many in the call, so I can know how many people to wait for the quiz?
We have 213.
Okay. Right.
And
Give it a bit longer.
Sani, can you just type your question in the Q&A? Okay, put your hand down.
I hope everyone's Wi-Fi connections are strong enough to do this quiz. Okay, we're at 45 people now. Might wait until we get to 100 and then starts because I don't want to keep everybody waiting for too long. Totally getting there. Or perhaps this is it for now. And if that's the case, I say without further ado, let's do this quiz. So we have accountability in the digital age was the first lecture of the day by Fritz Bussemacher. So try and remember what was said there. These aren't exactly based off of the lectures, but we just thought this was a fun additional optional thing to do to see if you guys learned anything, retained any information. So here we go. Oh, 1 second. Okay, so the first question is, what is a key aspect of accountability in the digital age? Is it A, decreased privacy, B, data transparency, C, higher internet speeds, or D, increased social media use? I'll give you guys a few more seconds to cast your votes. All right, there seems to be a lot of choice of B. I think almost everyone's cast their vote. I'm going to reveal the answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Correct answer is B. Well done, guys. Okay, next question is, oh, sorry. How does the digital age affect legal accountability? Is it A, laws became irrelevant, B, it complicates jurisdictional issues, C, reduces the need for laws, or D, makes enforcement easier? All right, a lot of people going for B again this time. 5 more seconds to cast your votes, and then we're gonna reveal the answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Answers B again. Let's go. 2 for 2. Okay. Next question. What roles do tech companies play in accountability? A, none. B, only provide platforms. C, responsible for user content, or D, monitor and enforce ethical use. Cast your votes. All right, everyone seems to be going for D. Hope everyone's choosing for themselves and not waiting to see what the majority are picking. But all right, 5 more seconds, get your votes in. And the correct answer is D. Well done. Next question. How does digital transformation impact corporate accountability? Is it A, reduces it significantly, B, transfers it to consumers, C, increases it through transparency, or D, no change? Cast your votes. All right, everyone seems to be going for C this time. Give you a couple more seconds to cast them before I reveal the answer. In 3, 2, 1. C, increases it through transparency. All right, the majority of you are getting all of these. Maybe we need to make them more difficult. Next question. What is a challenge in ensuring accountability online? A, internet access, B, user anonymity, C, high costs, or D, technology advancements? All right, we've got 2 competing answers this time, a little bit more than usual. All right, give you a couple more seconds to put your votes in. All right, 3, 2, 1. The answer is B, user anonymity. I'm sure technology advancements also make it a challenge, but I'd say this one is more of an issue. All right, next question. How does social media influence accountability? A, provides a platform for public scrutiny. B, reduces personal accountability. C, has no influence. Or D, increases privacy concerns. Cast your votes. Okay, there's some uncertainty here. All right, there seems to be a preference for D. Let's see if that was the right choice. I'm going to reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. A. Oh, first time that we didn't get it, or the majority didn't get it. A few of you did. All right, next one. What is the impact of digital footprints on accountability? A, makes individuals more traceable. B, has no impact. C, reduces accountability. Or D, only affects corporations. Time to redeem yourselves. All right. I think that's just about everybody that's voted. 3, 2, 1. All right, there we go. Back on track. Makes individuals more traceable. think this might be the last one before we move to Pablo's lecture. How do regulations like GDPR affect accountability? A, make it more complex. B, have no effect. C, increase accountability through compliance. Or D, only affect European companies. Okay. Few brave people going for the other options. All right, I think just about everyone has voted. 1 second. My lights keep turning off. And the correct answer is C. Well done. Increase accountability through compliance. All right, now we are on to Pablo's lecture, Cyber Mercenaries, the one that we just had. So if you are ready, time for quiz 2. What are cyber mercenaries primarily known for? A, offering cybersecurity training. B, conducting legal cyber operations. C, participating in state-sponsored attacks. Or D, providing hardware solutions. This one should be easy. All right, I think that's just about everybody. 3, 2, 1. C, participating in state-sponsored attacks. All right, nice. Next question. Who is most likely to employ cyber mercenaries? A, educational institutions, B, small businesses, C, state actors, or D, individual users? Cast your votes. All right, that one was quick. I think that was just about everybody. I'm gonna give you 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Correct, state actors. Next question. What is a primary concern regarding, oh, that was quick. What is a primary concern regarding cyber mercenaries? A, their cost, B, ethical implications of their actions, C, their ineffectiveness, or D, competition with government agencies? Okay, we're switching it up. Few competing answers. Okay, I think that's just about everybody. 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Correct answer is B, ethical implications of their actions. Next question. How do cyber mercenaries typically operate? Is it A, openly with clear identities, B, using advanced AI technologies, C, under the guise of legitimate businesses, or D, as part of military operations? What do we think? Most of you think it's C. We shall see. All right, a few more seconds. 3, 2, 1. C, correct answer. Well done. Majority of you are getting a lot of these correct, so that's great. Okay, next question. What distinguishes cyber mercenaries from hackers? A, their goals are purely financial. B, they do not use digital tools. C, they have formal military training. And D, they are often politically motivated. This one's a bit trickier. All right, last few of you cast your votes, please. 3, 2, 1. D, nice. They're often politically motivated. Correct. What type of cyber attacks are cyber mercenaries most involved in? A, identity theft, B, espionage and sabotage, C, phishing scams, or D, creating malware for profit? All right, seems to be going for B very confidently. Yeah, Yeah. Seems to be just about everybody. 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. B, espionage and sabotage. How are cyber mercenaries impacting international relations? A, no significant impact. B, increasing collaboration. C, complicating diplomatic engagements. Or D, reducing cyber threats. Anyone picks A, will be kicked out of this quiz. No, I'm just kidding. Oh. All right. I think that seems to be almost everyone. 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Correct answer is C, complicating diplomatic engagements. I think we're nearing the end of this quiz, so stick with me. You've gotten this far. What challenge do governments face in dealing with cyber mercenaries? A, identifying and prosecuting them. B, competing with their technologies. C, hiring them for state purposes. Or D, ensuring they follow ethical guidelines. This one's a bit tricky, but there is a correct answer. Cast your votes, people. Maybe 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Correct answer is A, identifying and prosecuting them. Very difficult indeed. And that's it. Thank you for participating. See you guys on Monday for the next 3 SANCS lectures that we have scheduled. You will get a reminder email on Monday with all the links to all of those. Pablo, and you stayed for the quiz. What did you think of the quiz?
No, it was good. It was good. I will just disagree on one point.
Okay, tell us.
Yeah, just on the question if what distinguishes cyber mercenaries from ethical hackers. So basically, they can be, of course, politically motivated, but as for mercenaries in the physical world, they are mainly motivated by money, and of course, they are participating to politically motivated operations led by states in particular, but themselves they are contributing mostly for money. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad you stayed for the quiz because we must have gotten that wrong. To be fair, this quiz was made before we watched your lecture, so maybe it would have been changed afterwards. But yeah, my apologies. All of you that clicked financial gain, you were correct.
The quiz was great. Otherwise, the two quiz were great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Noelle, if there's anything you have to add.
It was fabulous. Thank you, Pablo. To all the students who stayed and did the quiz, you guys are awesome. Really impressed. And just remember, each little one of these lectures builds blocks and blocks of information. So you're growing all the time. Sometimes it can seem a bit overwhelming. There's students who've had their hands up for a while. So when this meeting's over, I'm just going to just quickly see what those 3 students need, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Sounds good. You have their names noted down, Noelle, that they're not gonna disappear?
Nkesani, Lindidua, and Refilwe.
Okay, and there's one more now that has their hand up.
Yeah, I'll have to draw a line somewhere though.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're already way over time. So thank you again, Pablo, for your time. And thank you everyone that stayed on to do the quiz. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.